We're going to be revisiting some of these concepts that we talked about yesterday. We were building a component, a class-based component. So let's go back into our code and just kind of take a look at what that looked like. So here I've got my components folder, and I created this counter component, right? Okay. So inside here, we imported React. We always need to do this when we're creating a React component. That's very important. Now, let's go ahead and skip over this line for now because we haven't talked about this yet. But what I want to have you guys do is kind of read through this a little bit. All right, AJ, tell me what's going on here on line 5. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're reading what the line says, but what exactly are we doing?
You made a class, name is counter.
Yes.
And extend React.
Good. So what does extends mean?
Inherit.
We're inheriting from it, right? Exactly. So this is the class that we're creating. And then if we go down to the bottom of the file here, what are we doing here on line 29?
Kind of routing.
Routing, is that what you said?
Routing.
Oh, running is what you said. Not exactly. Right? I'm not actually instantiating this class inside here. What am I doing? We're exporting this class so that another file can import it and use it, right? And when I say export default, I'm saying that when I import from this file, this is the thing that I want to get automatically, okay? I want to automatically get that class. All right, cool. So let's keep going. If we get inside this class here, let's do line 6. Man.
Constructor props, so we're pretty much defining what properties we want.
So what's the constructor, first of all? Like, what is this method for?
To whatchamacallit, to initialize the whatever properties or function that you're running.
So we're initializing an actual component, right?
Right.
We're initializing this counter component. And then what is this function taking in? It's taking in this props object, right? So inside the method body, what are we doing inside there?
We're setting the state to 0 for a click.
Well, hold on. What happened up here, though? Don't forget about line 7.
We're passing more props to it, or specify.
Well, it's actually the same props, right? This is actually the same exact variable. Okay. But what are we passing that to, though? When we say super, and then we invoke it, yeah, the parent, right? That means that we're actually invoking the parent class's constructor function. That's what's happening there. Okay? All right? Good. So we're okay with that. And then on line 9, you said what was happening?
That's where setting a state of, for, in this case, it's listening for a click.
Good. Right. So my state can be more complex than this if I wanted to. I didn't just have to have a clicked inside there. I could have had some other stuff. Now, are you guys getting kind of clear on what we mean when we talk about state? Or do you want me to kind of expand on that at all? Talk about it a little bit? All right. So when we talk about state, all we're talking about is really something in the application that can change. Some information that is not really permanent, right? So this clicked counter here obviously can change because every time I click on the button, I'm going to want to increment that, bump it up by 1. So state could be something very simple like this where we have a little object that has 1 key value pair in it, or it could be something quite complex. Okay? It's just some information in our application that can change. And generally, we don't need to do all of the work of updating the actual DOM every time we make some state change because React is doing that behind the scenes for us. Makes it very easy. All right.
Question.
Yes.
So the state is still a attribute to the counter class, right?
Yeah, only I want to hesitate to. You're never going to use it like outside the class. You're never going to say like counter.state. Like let's say I create an instance of this class. We're not going to be saying something like counter.state. You wouldn't do that. Okay, we're really only going to use it inside this specific class. All right.
So is this .state property of the React component that we're setting a value to?
Yeah,
Okay.
we are, right? We're saying when we say this, it's referring to the component itself,
Right. No, but I mean, like,
and then the state attribute belongs to that component.
but it's an actual attribute of the React component. It's not like something we're just creating.
Correct. Yeah, we didn't just make that up, right?
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
Right. So you have, for all purposes of using React, it's not like some naming variable or whatever.
Right.
You actually have to use
It has to be called state. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Cool. So let's keep it going. We are down to
So, like, if we want to, let's say, save some constant variable, are we supposed to save it still or something else?
If you wanted it to be constant, something that was not state, you could just attach it inside here. You could just say this dot whatever equals whatever you want to equal, right? Yeah. That would work. But generally, the way that things are going to happen, if something's just going to be constant and it will always be in our rendered output, you don't really even need to have it up here, right? You can just put it in the rendered output. Okay. So the other thing we want to talk about is this handle click down here on line 16. Nick. Handle click. Is that too small? Sorry. Yeah.
So handle click and then we're using the arrow function.
So what is handle click in the context of this class? What is it?
Save.
No, remember our state was up when we defined this dot state, right? Yeah, I heard the answer over there somewhere. A little help for Nick?
Method.
Method.
Rapid.
So it is a method of the class, right? Okay, cool. And then we're assigning it to this arrow function right here. And then what's happening in the body of the arrow function?
So we're using this to assign it to the function set state.
Okay. By the way, did we write this method set state?
No.
Where did it come from, you think?
We have that.
React component, right? Because we're inheriting from this thing. So that's how we have access to that function. All right? Cool. And then what are we passing in when we, this is being invoked, right? You see the parentheses here. What are we passing into it?
Click function.
No, I'm not passing in a function. What am I passing in? These curly braces indicate what? An object, right? And then inside that object, I have this key called clicked, right? And then my value is going to be what?
Click value plus 1.
Yeah, so I'm going to take whatever the current clicked value is from the state and then just add 1 to that. That's all. Okay? So what React is then going to do is it's going to update that state for us. Remember, we don't want to try to update it ourselves. We can't just say this.state.clicked equals some new number. Because what's going to happen is if we update that directly like that, React won't know to actually update the what's showing up on our screen. Okay? So that wouldn't be very good. If we changed the click count, but it didn't actually change on screen, well, what's the use of that, right?
That's why you're adding
Completely
the
useless.
values one.
So that's why we're calling set state. Whenever you want to change the state inside of a class component, you need to call that method set state. Okay?
Well, so what was the reasoning you said again yesterday to why you don't want to update the state object, but use a set state method?
Well, I just said it again because if we update the state object directly, it won't actually update the appearance on the screen.
Oh right, yeah.
Because React won't know I need to change what's on screen at this point because I haven't called the set state.
Yeah. No,
That's the signal to React telling React, hey, something has changed in the state of this component. So please change what the output on the screen is. Okay.
So then the set state will also update the state object and refresh.
Correct. So once the state is actually successfully updated by React, then it will actually update what we're seeing on the page.
Okay. And that's why the what you call it, the object you're passing in, the keys has to match the same keys that you use in your state definition.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously if I change the key here, then I've just updated a different key value pair.
Oh, okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
Exactly. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get down here to render line 22. Esteban. What's happening on line 22? You want it bigger?
No, it's like it's the glare.
Oh, the glare. Yeah, sorry about that.
Line 22, render.
Okay, so what is render?
You want to render it in your browser.
Well, no, but what is this in the context of the class, though?
So it's let's go out on a limb and say it's a function.
It is a function, and when it's a function inside of class, what do we call those?
Method.
Yes, there you go. Method, right? Okay, cool. So what are we doing inside this render method?
You're rendering that return.
Rendering the return. Okay, so inside the body of the function, I'm returning JSX, right? This thing that we were talking about yesterday, which is it's a JavaScript extension, which looks a bit like HTML. Pretty similar, right? Okay, cool. And then inside there, we've got this button, and then it has some different attributes to it. Let's not worry about the class name just yet. But then when we said on click, what's that doing for us?
It's an event listener.
Yeah, behind the scenes, it's adding an event listener to this button for us, right?
Yeah.
And the other cool thing about it is that if I ever remove this component from whatever my app is showing at any given time, it's also going to take away that event listener for me. So I don't need to worry about sort of the cleanup part of things. That's where React comes in handy. All right. And then all we're doing inside that button is we're just saying clicked however many times, right? This .state.clicked is telling me what is that number? What's the current number, right? All right, cool. Any questions about this component before we move on? Yes.
So
Joel.
when you scroll up, when you do this class extends React component, all of these methods are automatically generated. Or you were saying earlier that React comes in handy because it will remove a lot of cleanup without you manually having to do so. So
yeah, part of the context with that though you've missed because those were
Okay.
previous discussions that we
I see.
had. But when we call super, what that means is that we're calling the constructor of the parent class, which is this React.component class. Okay. Handle click is not something that is built into React. That's a method that we built ourselves. And then render is built into React as well because React already knows what to do with a render function. It's actually going to put this on screen for us.
Very nice.
All right. Cool. So that is a class-based component. One other thing I want to mention about class-based components you guys might come across is this idea of lifecycle events. Let me see if I can pull it up. So if you guys come across this lesson, there are some different lifecycle points in the lifecycle of a component that you can tap into. Okay, so if I want to do something whenever the component updates, I can create one of these methods. So one of them that we have, hopefully you guys can see this, is component did update. Okay, and I'm just going to experiment with that real quick so you guys can see how that works. So let me open up the terminal here and actually run this app, npm run start. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this method here, component did update. Okay, and I think what that gives us, if I remember correctly, it's going to give us the previous props of our component. Okay. So let's try this. So it's going to give us prev props, and what I want to do is I just want to log out a message saying the component updated, something like that, right? The component updated. Okay, let's go here to our React app. I'll open up my console here. Alright, now I'm going to click this guy. Notice how every time I click it, it's saying the component updated. Can you guys see that okay? Shoot. Okay. So that should make sense. So every time we're changing the state inside this component, it's running this particular function. That's what we call a lifecycle method. It happens at a specific point in time, right? Whenever anything changes about this. Okay?
Question.
Yes.
If we were to put the console log right under inside the end of click method, we're going to get the same result right after click.
Oh, inside here.
Yeah, just yeah.
Yeah, however, I mean, it would look basically the same to us in the console, but technically it's not happening at the exact same time. So what's happening is it's running this set state function first, and then after that has done all of its work, then it's going to run
But
this.
if you put that under the state, the set state function,
No.
it's the exact same. No.
No, here's why. This is kind of counterintuitive, but this function does not necessarily happen synchronously, okay? So if I do this first and I do this next, it will run this, but the component might not have actually updated yet. The update only happens once this has completed all of its work, which doesn't happen synchronously. Okay? So there's no guarantee that by the time, if I move this up in here, there's no guarantee that by the time I've gotten to that statement, the component has actually updated. Yes?
Now, this, the component did update, is that more for troubleshooting, or what's the purpose behind using that?
Not necessarily troubleshooting. There might be things that you're looking for. So remember, components can also receive props from above, somewhere above in our component tree. And if some props changed that this component was being given, we might want to respond to that in some way. Okay?
Can you run any function in there?
Can I do anything inside here? Is that what you're asking? Pretty much, yeah. Anything that's syntactically valid. Yeah. Yeah, so if I was being given some props, this component, and those props had changed in some way, then this might be a place where I could look for that change. Right? Or if I'm changing my state and I just want to do something at the point that it changes, then I can handle it inside there. So Nowadays, most things are actually moving towards what's called functional components. Okay, this is a class-based component. We're going to get more into functional components, which are a little bit easier to deal with. So let's do something like that. Let's say I want to create a fancy paragraph component. Okay, I'll just create that in here. Fancy paragraph. Okay, I always need to import React. All right, and then I'm going to create, instead of a class, I'm just going to create a function. Okay, so we'll call it const fancy paragraph. Okay, and I'm going to set that equal to an arrow function. My arrow function will take in some props. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return something out. What I'm going to return out, again, is just going to be this JSX that we've been talking about. So I'm going to say return, and then inside here I'm going to do a p tag. Okay? What I want to do inside these two p tags is I want to put the actual children. So what's actually nested in between my fancy paragraph tags? So let's do that. So let's say props dot children. Okay, and then the other thing is, since this is a fancy paragraph, it wouldn't be so fancy if I didn't have any styling in it, right? All right, so let's see how we can rectify this. I'm going to use something for those of you guys who have gotten to the styles section. You'll kind of know what I'm talking about. I'm going to use something called CSS Modules. Okay, and what that allows me to do is it allows me to create a CSS file just for this specific component, and it's not going to conflict with anything else in my application. So let's create this file over here. We'll say fancy paragraph.module.css. Okay, and then inside that that CSS file, I just want to have my .fancy class. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it be like a striped thing. So basically, my odd children, I want to have maybe a darker background, something like that. So we'll say nth child, and we'll do odd. Okay, and I'll just say the background will be what color? I'll say RGB 250, 250, 250. Why do I always think it's 255? All right, let me update. How about 240? Is that going to be noticeable enough? Oh, probably not on the screen. Let me make it even more. Whoops.
Or I just do background gray. Forward.
All right.
Instead of RGB.
Yeah, let's keep it simple, right? Jeez. I'm always overcomplicating things. All right, good. Cool. So now we've got this file, but we actually have to import this into our component to use it. So let's go up here to our fancy paragraph, and I'm going to say import styles from the same directory that we're in, and then I'm going to say fancy paragraph, graph.module.css. Okay, so now I've got this styles object where I can actually call on specific styles that are in that modules file. So in here,
So importing styles is different than importing components. Because for the components, we don't have to specify the extension, but for this, we have to write out the whole file name.
yeah, we do need to specify the extension here. So when we're in JavaScript world, we don't need to specify the extension when we're using a JS extension. You can leave that off. Yeah. So now that I've brought this styles object in, I can actually use the different styles that are inside of it when I use that class name attribute. You guys remember that? We did it yesterday. So instead of class, I'm going to say class name. Okay? And since I want that to be the result of a JavaScript expression, I need to use these curly braces. So inside here, I'm going to say styles.fancy. All right. Now, what's the final thing that I need to do in this file before I move on? I've got to export it, right? Otherwise, there's no way I can use this from somewhere else. So let's say export default fancy paragraph. Okay. So now if I want to use this inside my app, all I need to do is go back to my app.js here and import it, right? So let's come down here. Let's say import fancy paragraph from .components fancy. There we go. Cool. And then I can come down here underneath my counter and drop in a fancy paragraph. Now what do I need to pass to my fancy paragraph? Children, right. So whatever is nested inside here is going to show up inside the p tags that were in my fancy paragraph. So how about we just do some lorem ipsum, right? Or not? Do I need to do it in my, oh jeez. I'm not getting my auto completions in because I'm not inside of an HTML file. I'll do my own version, lorem ipsum. Sweet. Alright, so it's 2 words this time, right? Alright. So there we go. And then if I inspect this element here, what's that?
With the gray. I think it's on there, it's just you can't see it. It's a screen. It's a light gray.
Why is it not giving me a background here?
Maybe it was expecting it to be
All right, well, we'll look at that again, but I wanted you guys to notice that, do you see this class name right here? Kind of gnarly looking, right? So it actually added basically a hash to the end of that so that it doesn't collide with any of the other styles in my application. So that way, if I have a fancy style in some other component and I'm using CSS modules, those two things won't conflict with each other. All right. Did I do something wrong in my CSS file? What did I do wrong here?
Specify coverage. It takes it.
Let me try something else. What if we say font size 36 pixels, I don't know, 2M, something like that? No? Huh, why is that not applying?
You don't have to import it into the app.js, right? 'Cause you're
No.
importing it into the
No, you just
component.
import it into the component itself.
And it doesn't matter.
Styles.fancy.
But I broke it down because of the size, right, of the screen. Put it in 2 lines. The path on the component.
Oh, yeah. So it's just doing that because,
Because of the size,
yeah.
Okay.
Huh. That's pretty strange.
Try the thing, remove the name and all that stuff. See if you can just get it with the basic. Just the background.
If I remove what? The background?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you just go and just make fancy with the background gray.
Okay.
Remove the nth child out, all that stuff.
Oh, right, sure. Maybe that's what it was. The nth child was messed up.
That would be it.
Yeah.
What was wrong with my nth child?
Is it only referred to the children that's underneath that? I thought it was like whatever, rather than the element itself.
So it was the very oh, but it wasn't the first child because it's underneath the counter, right?
But when you put lorem ipsum in that paragraph, paragraph,
Whoops.
that tag, isn't that the parent?
No, the parent is the element higher than it in the yeah. So if I bring back what we have and then I move it in there, it should be fine, right? So I should be able to just bring this guy, this whole
Lower listen into a separate div inside the paragraph.
there. See, that works. Yeah, just because it wasn't the first child.
Yeah, it's the second chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That makes sense.
Cool. All right. So that's better.
So, quick question for the
Yeah.
styles import, right?
Mhm.
So when you do a dot, it's using the selectors inside the CSS to identify whatever thing you were using.
Yeah, so the dot is just saying this is the name of the class. And one thing I have to tell you guys too is that you guys can't use hyphens in your class names if you're going to use CSS modules.
Oh,
You
no,
can
no.
use camel case though.
Okay. Well, what I meant more was which one was it? In your fancy paragraph.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Let's see here. Yeah, the style's that fancy, so that convention is whatever import. You're using the styles object to make the import, and that fancy is any selector, whether it's class, ID, or whatever it is.
No, an ID wouldn't work that way.
Okay.
How would I do it?
An ID, if you're using CSS modules, let me think. I'm not sure that it would work with CSS modules. You're generally not going to use IDs when you're doing CSS
Oh, it
modules.
looks-
You're
it's
only going to
class.
use classes.
Yeah, it says class name.
Exactly. So yeah, this could be called anything. I don't necessarily have to call it styles, but these two have to match. That's all.
Of course, yeah, because you're
Yeah.
importing that object from that.
I could call it S, and it would still work the same. Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay. So now we've got this fancy paragraph. What I wanted to do is actually build something where we're creating sort of a list of things using the fancy paragraph component. All right. So let's create another component. And I'll just call this random list. Okay. I'm going to import React again. Always, right? Okay, and then I'm going to create another function. This is going to be another functional component. So we'll say const random list equals a function. And then at the end, I always need to export that function, right? Random list. All right. And then inside my random list, what I want to have is just a button that's going to generate something for me. So I'm going to return out some JSX here. We'll put it in a div just for fun. Whoops, why did it do that? Okay. Inside this div, I'm going to have a button. And then I'm going to put inside the button generate number. Okay. Now, since I'm going to have some state inside this component, because I'm going to want to have a list of numbers and I'm going to want to add to that list every single time we click the button, I'm going to need to import something else from React. Something that can help me manage my state, because we're not inside of a class right now, right? So I can also import this thing called a hook, which is called useState. Okay? useState is a function that I can call inside my component. So inside this component, and this is going to look really weird for you guys initially, so don't worry too much about it, but I'll go over it. So we'll say const items set items equals the result of invoking useState against an empty array. Okay? Does this look like anything you guys have seen in the past couple days? Ooh, I heard destructuring somewhere. This is destructuring right there. Okay? So what's happening is we're calling this function useState and we're passing it in an empty array. The result that that's giving us is it's giving us an array that has two things inside of it. I'm saying I want the first thing to be called items and the second thing to be called set items. What do you think the second thing does for me?
It sets that.
It's going to set what those items are. So if I need to change them later on, I can actually reset them. Okay? So initially they're going to be set to just this empty array. I don't have any items right now. When the component first loads up. All right. Anybody have any questions about destructuring? I think I'm going to go over it this afternoon, maybe as a separate thing. But that's all that's happening right there. All right. So now that we've got this set items function, let's do something where we can actually handle a button click. Or actually, before we do the button click, let's put our items somewhere in our HTML, right? So let's say I want to put my items down here. I'm going to use our map function. This is the thing that we talked about yesterday. So I'm going to say my items dot map. Okay? You guys remember what the map function does?
Turns a new array.
Yes, exactly. It basically transforms each element of an array in a specific way, whatever way I want it to be transformed in. Okay? So what we have to pass map is going to be a callback function, right? My callback function is going to take in some item and also the index of that item. And then what I'm going to return out is just going to be a fancy paragraph. So do I have my fancy paragraph in this component? I've got to import it, right? So let's go bring it in. Fancy paragraph from same directory, fancy paragraph. Okay? So for each one of these, I want to render out a fancy paragraph. And then inside there, what do I want to put? The item itself. Exactly. Okay? So now we've got this fairly built out. We don't yet have the means of iterating through it, or we are iterating through our list, but we're not actually able to generate any items yet, right? So let's go about building that. So I might want to have a function up in here called handle click or something like that. That's going to generate me a new number. So we'll say const handle click equals an arrow function. Okay? And let's just create a random number, say from like, I don't know, 0 to 99. So I'll say const random equals math.random. Okay. And then I'm going to multiply that by 99. Now, if I want it to be an integer, what do I need to do? This is going to give me a decimal right here. Yeah, I need to floor it, right? So let's just do that. Let's say math.floor. And then we'll pass in this guy here. Okay, so now that I have this random number, how do I want to add that into my items?
You do the set item.
I'm going to use this function right here. Exactly. So if I call set items, am I just going to push into my items array, or how do we want to do this? Your inclination might be yes. Let's just go ahead and push into that items array and then call this set items function and be done with it. We're going to run into a problem with that though, but we'll try it. All right, so let's just go down here, items.push random. Okay, and then I'm going to set items to whatever this items object is. Okay. And then what do I need to do with that handle click function? Yeah, I need to actually put that as a click handler here. So down here we'll say on click equals handle click. Okay, so if I want to put this guy into my application, I need to go back to my app.js, right? Import this guy. So import random list components. Okay. Now that I've got that here, I'm just going to dump my fancy paragraph because we're not really using that right now. Random list. Okay. Comment this out. Oops. Okay, and if I go back to my list here, I've got my component up here. It says generate number, and I can generate a number, right? Wow, what's happening here? I keep clicking on it, but nothing's happening. So no. I told you we were going to run into a problem, and sure enough. So here's what's going on. When we run this set items function against the exact same items array, React is thinking to itself, hey, nothing actually changed, right? We thought that something changed, but React is saying, no, you're giving me back the exact same array that I already had in memory, okay? So we have to do something a little bit different to make this work the way that we're expecting it to. What we're going to do is, instead of pushing to it, we're going to use something called the spread operator. Okay? Yeah, so what this means is I'm taking all the items that were already in my items array and I'm putting them in this new array here. And then at the end of that, what I'm going to put is this new random number that I've just generated. Oops, radnum. Okay. So let's try this.
It's doing evens now.
Yeah, started on an odd, now they're all even. Oh, there's another odd. All right. Which one?
No, he imported it to that component.
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually a good question. So I don't have the fancy paragraph imported in my app.js, but the other component is using it underneath, right? Okay, so this is working the way that we expected it, so that's all good. Yes?
Sorry, is there a way
It's
to
okay.
make it not a list and for it to just keep changing the number?
Of course, yeah, that could have been one number that I was just replacing every single time. Sure, easily. Okay, we did run into a slight console error down at the bottom, and I want to address that with you guys real quickly. Notice here it's telling us each child in a list should have a unique key property. Okay, so when we render out a list in React and we're mapping through that list, it's requiring that we pass it a unique key for each item, okay? So if we had a unique key, like if this was data that was coming from a database or something like that, we would have a unique ID, and that could be used for that. If all else fails and we don't really have a unique ID, we could actually use the index in the array, okay? So that's like a fallback that we could do. So let me go back in here and just add this as a key. So for my fancy paragraph, I want to say key equals I. Okay? And let's see if we can make that warning go away. So now, if I generate number a bunch of times, it's not complaining at me anymore, right? I am getting a little warning about something being imported and not used. That's just the logo up here, so I can comment that out. And now we have no warnings, no errors, everything's good, right? I can still use my click counter, that still works. I can still generate numbers, everything's good. Yeah, big time. I forgot my charger today, so I gotta go get that. Any questions though? I know this went on a little bit long today. Sorry about that. Yes, Isaiah.
Can you go back to the random list there? Anything else?
Yeah, random list.
Um,
Sure.
Trying to you scroll up. I'm just trying to figure out like how to read the line 6.
Ah. Yeah. So in line 6, what's happening is we're calling this function useState. We're passing in an array, and then the result of that is actually giving us back a new array.
Right. So then const is an array of object items and set items. Like,
So what we're doing is we're actually destructuring an array that it was giving us back. That array is going to have 2 elements in it. The first thing is going to be my items. The second thing is just going to be a function that will allow me to replace my items at some later point.
okay. It's just one of those context understanding. You know what those things actually mean before
Yeah.
reading this, since it's ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called
Yeah, and
something
when
else
we talk about destructuring some more, this will start to make a little bit more sense. But I recognize that it's going to look a little bit weird for you guys the first few times to see it. Definitely.
And yeah, and it's just me just trying to understand like the set items takes an argument of an array in which you're using I forgot that word for it, but rest of items.
Yeah, so we're using this spread operator to
Right,
say, let's take all the items that are currently in there so that we can put those in this new array. And then we're going to tack on this new item that we just created.
Right. So I guess that's the part that's a little confusing, right? So I guess on line 6, what is items? Because that one doesn't have a spread operator, right?
On line 6, it was actually an array that this returned
okay.
us. Yeah, so when we called the useState function, it returned us out an array that had these 2 things in it.
Oh, okay.
Items is now going to be an empty array because that's what I said I wanted it to be.
Right, and that's why
initially.
the spread operator will actually unpack that array through a function
Right.
array itself.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay.
All right, how about over here? How you guys feeling about
I don't know
this?
we can get this going better.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Cool. I'll do it. Everyone ready for some kickball?
You know, I'm ready to catch him.
Somebody must want to play. I want to play. All right, I'll go out there even if there are like 5 people. I don't care.
That's enough.
That's enough.